What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, we got to talk about Jim Ryan leaving Sony. My dear God, what a news story to come out very late in the day on some random Wednesday. Wow. Well, we need to talk about what this means in the future for PlayStation, if this is a good or bad news. But the short of it is that he's leaving the company. He's stepping down as CEO after almost 30 years being part of Sony and multiple different divisions. I think he held at least like 4 or 5 kind of upper echelon kind of job, and he's going to be leaving in March, and then they're going to be basically searching for a replacement. Now, I did see people kind of speculating Herman Holtz. He's somebody that's been in that position for an okay amount of time, not a super long time to be honest with you, but obviously coming from Guerrilla and just kind of rising up the ranks, I do think he makes a lot of sense, even though he's more focused on like the first party studio side of things. I did see Shuhei Yoshida. I mean, that guy is just an absolute freaking legend who kind of took almost like a demotion kind of job to work with indies. Not that indies are not important, but I think from his previous job, he kind of went backwards, but he seems to have embraced it massively. I think it's actually what he wanted to do in the first place. That is a guy who I truly do believe cares about games, just purely games and all different kinds of games, maybe more than any other higher up, including Herman. I actually would believe that Shuhei cares more about games in terms of like the broader range of things than anybody else. So I would actually kind of be steering for either one of those two to take it. It might just be a name that we've never kind of heard before. I don't know how many people prominently knew of Jim Ryan, say, before he took up this role, but he's gone. Now, I got to be honest with you. I was never really a fan. I don't really think that's all that controversial. I think even if you're the most PlayStation diehard person, Jim Ryan has never been the most massive, kind of mascot to those fans, right? I think it was a downgrade from Sean Layden. I've talked a lot about him and his kind of legacy. Honestly, and again, like zero fanboy here, right? Like I would say the same thing, or we'd be looking at it actually in like a separate case for Xbox or Nintendo or PlayStation. This was for Jim Ryan. This was a big step into PlayStation just being so corporate, and not to take it all out on the guy, right? It actually is more of like the era that we're in, and you could argue if he's the cause of it or if he's just a big part in the overall era, right? And that's where I stand with this. I feel that no matter what, no matter the good that PlayStation has done, which they have done a lot of good in even the past couple of years, and they've also done a lot of not good, right? But more than anything that I think I would look at when I look at Jim Ryan's tenure as, the head of PlayStation here is corporate. Is it PlayStation just feels more like a corporate, which they are. I mean, they've been for a long time, and it's why, we talk about console fanboys, and it's like, why do you, worship these corporations, these billion-dollar corporations? They could absolutely care less about us, so why do we, kiss their feet and, think these consoles are, our gods and stuff? It's always been weird. So they always have been that. But I think to the PS3 era, when PlayStation was really fighting from behind for the majority of it, right? And the kind of creativity that came out of that, and that led them into the PS4, where they were just making right decision after right decision. They were taking those jabs at Xbox with the whole sharing of discs, that very hilarious, which Shuhei Yoshida obviously was part of that, right? Like, they were just nailing it, and the quality was there. The creativity, the freedom to do things was there in that PS3, PS4 era. Now, that's where I kind of grew up in gaming. That's really where I started to play the most games maybe in my life, right, and started to really get into it, was that time. So obviously, if you came up in a different era of gaming, you might think of these eras differently. That's how I think of that era. So whoever's the boss at that time, and for an okay amount of that time, Sean Layden, right, you think of him and you say, okay, this is a guy who got freaking Crash Bandicoot to come back, right? This is a guy who has talked about games budgets ballooning too much, and he had to have had that kind of mindset when he was boss. So that was where we were, and then Jim Ryan kind of comes in, and you have the success, the massive success that is PlayStation over the last half decade plus, but at the same time they start to get into this trajectory of just being very corporate. The communication is nowhere near as good as it used to be. You could argue how bad, you could say it's terrible, you could say it's awful. I would just say it's not as good as what it was. The creativity, and again, some of that stuff is probably not even Jim Ryan's fault, right? Like the ballooning of gaming budgets and the fact that you can't take risks on, say, like a Sly Cooper coming back, or you can never make games like Puppeteer ever again. That's not necessarily all on Jim Ryan, right? But he kind of represents that era of PlayStation that I see it. So I was never a massive fan. Obviously, I wish the guy all the best. You know, he's retiring to spend time with family and to not like split his life in two different places. I'm not asking and I'm not wishing for anything nasty to happen to him, but I gotta say, like, it's not the worst thing to me that he's leaving. Now, with that being said, I guess final part of this video, is there any changes that are really going to happen, you know, without him? Well, again, it actually all depends on what I just said. All of this change of Sony or PlayStation being more corporate, these kind of decisions of creativity and this freedom, where did it come from? Is that the company mindset? Was that brought on specifically by him? Or is that just like a byproduct of the time? If it's a byproduct of the time, anybody coming in after, they might be a better communicator. I think it's pretty well known to a lot of people. I don't think any of us consider Jim Ryan like a gamer, right? Like there's that picture of him holding a controller. I don't think you would ask him like, hey, what are your top 50 games of all time? And I don't think you'd expect him to go into like this thesis of all these, you know, deep cut games he's played. I don't think that would literally ever happen. So maybe you could find like a figurehead there that would, like if you had a Shuhei Yoshida, you could talk to that guy for weeks about games that he's played, right? So you could have it better on that front. But the mentality of PlayStation, where PlayStation is going in the future, does that change with anybody, you know, coming up? Not necessarily. In fact, I would actually argue no. I guess like my prediction, how I see the entire thing, I don't think a lot of this stuff falls on him. I think he's obviously the leader, right? He kind of spearheads it, but I think it's just like a byproduct of the time and just the way things work. I don't think all of these things that I have been talking about for 7 minutes here, I don't think it's all his fault. So when he gets replaced, which he's obviously going to, the new person coming in, they might be like a better speaker. They might be able to like represent the average gamer a little bit more, and maybe that helps. But in terms of like, does it change anything massively with, say, live service, right? Does that change? Or people are maybe worried about like, well, do PC things get pulled back? I think the major pushes Sony has made, for good and bad, right? Them going to PC more, that is good. That is actually a good thing. Does that change? No. Does the live service stuff, which I think is largely bad, does that change? No, I actually really don't think it does. I don't think that's up to Jim Ryan in the first place. So that's my opinion. I could totally be wrong. Obviously, I'm not there, but there's my opinion on it. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.